What's that?
Our new Space Coast Credit Union watchdog.
Watchdog.
The financial products and services you want, plus the protection you need. Space Coast Credit Union. Your life, your financial watchdog.
It's another guaranteed victory Sunday for the Miami Dolphins. The New York Jets are coming to town. How's that for a positive spin on things? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of Dolphins Deep Dive with Perk. I am your host, Chris Perkins, your South Florida Sun Sentinel Miami Dolphins columnist. That is David Furones, your South Florida Sun Sentinel Miami Dolphins writer. Furones, are you positive, man? You positive going forward? You think these final 5 games are going to produce a playoff victory? Or playoff appearance, I should say.
Last time I was on with you, I said I'm surprised I'm doing the show with Joe Namath, and now the Dolphins really are playing the former team of Joe Namath, as you guarantee another victory. So, I'm still thawing out from Green Bay, but it's nice to get some cool weather in Miami, too.
It is, man. I think I'm going to make some turkey chili today, actually. Maybe even some hot cocoa. That's serious. I really am. I look like an idiot to the people in Green Bay, but hey, they don't see me right now.
You know, in Buffalo, whatever temperature it was there, wasn't it like 40? You tell me. I forget. But they said it didn't qualify for being cold enough to make hot chocolate in the press box. I was so disappointed. That's one of my favorite things from the Buffalo press box.
I know we're soft. We are soft down here, aren't we? We're gonna talk about that.
Soft. It's about enjoying hot chocolate.
I know. I'm in the group. I'm in that group. I'm just as soft as anybody else. We're going to talk about that today. As always, we welcome our viewers on YouTube. We invite you to leave a question, thought, or comment in our comment section in our live chat. The best place to get intelligent Dolphins conversation. I remind you, some of the questions, comments, and thoughts I will answer or address later on today in an online Q&A article. We also invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, the weekly Fins Flash. That way you can stay updated on everything that I write, David Furones writes, and Dave Hyde writes on the Dolphins. And we remind you that if you miss any part of this show, you can catch the podcast on Amazon, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. So now listen, let's talk about this position that the Dolphins are in. The loss to Green Bay was very disappointing. It had people fired up. We're going to talk if heads roll at the end of the season, which heads are on the chopping block. We're also going to talk about the playoff hopes for the Dolphins. 5 games to play. They do still have legit playoff hopes. I know that sounds ridiculous coming off the Green Bay game, but they do still have legit playoff hopes. We'll talk about that. We got our Furones bonus, of course, and Furones is going to tell us which narratives the Dolphins can knock down in these last 5 games. And after that, we will conclude with our fearless predictions. You already know where I'm going. I told you it's guaranteed victory week, so you know what I'm picking in this game. Let's get into this thing. As we always say around here, there's an ocean of possibilities. Let's dive in. All right, Furones, let's talk about if heads roll at the end of the season, whose head should be on the chopping block. And look, let's say this up front. If the Dolphins make the playoffs, no heads are going to roll. Agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah. So we're only talking about like maybe a 7-10 finish, right? If they lose 3 of the last 5, if they lose 4 of the last 5, maybe even at 9-8, if you don't make the playoffs, people stay. But we'll see about that, Furones. Is that the top head on the chopping block for me would be Chris Greer. And let me say this also, the reason that I would have a head on the chopping block if I'm Steve Ross would not necessarily be because of this season. It would be the 3-year culmination that I don't have a playoff victory and my team seems to be going backward when it comes to competition against top teams. I worked the numbers today. In 2022, the Dolphins were 2-6 against playoff teams, and they lost by an average score of 29-24. Last year, the Dolphins are 1-6 against playoff teams. They lose by an average score of 32-16. So far this year, they're 0-4 against playoff teams. They lose by an average score of 29-14. And I want you to notice how the Dolphins offense goes down. 24 points per game in 2022, 16 points per game in 2023, 14 points per game in 2024. If I'm Steve Ross, I'm concerned about that. And I'm concerned about how the backup quarterback situation was handled. Again, it's not necessarily the record this year. It's the 3-year culmination and what I've seen in certain spots. That's what I would think. So Chris Greer would be the first head on the chopping block for me, Furones.
Perk, I loved your column in the aftermath of the loss to Green Bay, posing this exact question and then essentially saying no. So it got my but I mean I agree with you on a lot of that, but I just don't see them breaking it up at this point. But I would start at the top if I were to go down that route. But to me, you already committed to making this a multi-year run from 2024 this year on. When you extended Mike McDaniel, when you extended Tua Tagovailoa, when you extended Jalen Waddle, when you extended Jalen Ramsey, when you gave Tyreek Hill more guarantees over the duration of his contract. If you don't achieve your goals this season, I feel this organization will just fall back on the fact that Tua suffered a concussion, and then that sort of derailed the early part of the year. So it's disappointing that the greatest collection of talent the Dolphins have had since at least the past 20 years is not amounting to anything in terms of deep runs, playoff success that we know of to this point. That's extremely disappointing because when I compare, that's one thing I hold against Mike McDaniel is he has a similar record to other recent coaches who had far less talent. And then Greer, as much talent as there is, and maybe you give him credit for piecing together a talented roster, but is it poorly pieced together is the other question there. So, but I think they run it back. They say the season was derailed by losing Tua for 4 games. Prioritize the backup quarterback position this offseason so that you can sort of fix that one issue, if you call it your only issue going forward. Come back with Jalen Phillips and the Bradley Chubb combination at edge rusher together in 2025, and now say, now is our really our shot. So, and if it doesn't work after that, you probably have to clean house altogether. New GM, new coach combination to rebuild entirely with some of the holdovers that you've committed to contractually from this regime, but playing out their contracts until you develop a new core through the draft. But you roll with this core, I think, until the wheels fall off because you committed to it so substantially.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that, Furones, because look, you did commit to this core, and it would be hard to get out of it. Let's set aside the optics of it, just the financials of it. It would really be hard after you've committed to Tua and Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and Jalen Ramsey. It's hard to get out of those things, especially the next year, 2 years afterwards, whatever. That's fine, but after that following year, it's hard to get out of it. I want to say what's up to Scott Pro, Matthew Blue, Juan Pablo Barbuth, Sean Heller. What's up, Sean? Let's see, Comrade watching in Scotland, Matthew Blue in Texas. As a matter of fact, that's my home state. What's up, Matthew? I was in San Antonio and Arlington/Dallas. I went to UTA. Let's see, who else is out here? One-Eyed Jack 233, Lee King Snatch. CTFDU, Derek, Rashawn Broken Bro, Dave Harbor from San Diego as usual. Let's see here. So what do we got on here? Let me say this, Furones. When we talk about the Dolphins and breaking this thing up possibly, one of the complications that I would see is Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel work so well together. So if you brought in a new GM, would you want a voice that goes along with Mike McDaniel, or would you want a strong GM who has his own vision? And what is that going to do to their working relationship? But the other thing that you do have to consider, Furones, do you want these guys going forward with your organization, choosing the new draft picks, choosing the new backup quarterback? Do you trust their judgment? Have they shown you enough that they should both still be in place if you don't make the playoffs this year?
Well, their working relationship is part of the reason why I believe you stick with them together until the wheels fall off, and then you know for certain, and some people in their opinion, you might know for certain right now, but and I know you were ahead of the curve in even putting anyone on the hot seat when it wasn't a popular idea, but saying, and something that I agreed with was, hey, if they start come out to a slow start this season, I'm talking about when you had that opinion all the way back at the end of last year, then yeah, I mean, I was kind of with you on it. That, and then now when you see everyone, or when you see it actually happen, now everyone sort of it goes strong in the other direction of fire everyone. But I mean, this is why I do want to see them stick with it together. But then it's just when you do decide, if and when that day does come, if it never happens where they achieve postseason success and make deep runs after next year, and whether there's signs of whether you should keep it together the year after that, etc., then you bring them down together and you clean house and you start a completely new rebuild from then on for that exact reason. Because I don't want to see maybe one without the other. Because I think they do work well together, and I think if they go down, they go down together.
Yeah, one thing that I would like to see is somebody in that organization, whether it's Marvin Allen, Reggie McKenzie, Tom Garfinkel, force some changes there. Make them get the workhorse running back. They've got the tight end thing handled. An upgrade at slot receiver. I like the new offense because it's not as gimmicky. I think if you did get a workhorse running back, and I was a big advocate of Dalvin Cook. Good thing they didn't get Dalvin Cook, because that would have been a disaster. He was done. But the idea
he admits when he's wrong. He admits when he's wrong, people.
That's right. That's right. No, I make a lot of those admissions, by the way. But, the idea is you have somebody who can get 15, 18 carries per game and really make that defense drop that eighth man into the box. And now you can go over the top. And Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert are not built for that. They're built for outside zone, look for that cutback lane, and then house it. They're not meant for 15, 18 carries per game. So maybe Jalen Wright is, maybe Chris Brooks was, but get that guy. I think that if you have that element along with Jonnu Smith and along with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, well, now you can really attack defenses at all levels, run, pass, short yardage, goal line, red zone, all over the place. I think you're just so hard to defend once you get that last element in there. So they haven't done it themselves, Furones, so I would like to see somebody force them to do that.
Park, you want another running back? You want another running back?
I want a workhorse.
They drafted in the middle rounds the past two drafts. It was a shock when everyone saw that Jalen Wright was taken with the Dolphins' fourth-round pick, their third selection in the past draft, after already taking Devon Achane the year before. But now, Jalen Wright has some of those qualities. He could be a physical runner, and even Raheem Mostert at times. I was disappointed in Green Bay in those elements that they didn't go and commit to the run, because we did see when the Dolphins had to go to their backup quarterbacks, especially the Snoop Huntley games, that they had a run game going. They had a 4-game stretch of at least 149 rushing yards or more. And then after Tua's first game, Tua kind of gets into a groove, and you sort of go away from that. So I feel like they have that. They can go to it. And then in the cold, I know they fell behind early. And once you fall behind by 2 scores early, then you kind of get away from it. But, hey, look, I just watched Syracuse play against UM. They still kind of had the run game going a little bit, even when they fell behind 3 scores. So they still had a balanced offense, and then eventually led to a comeback because they had so much time left. So I felt like you didn't need to abandon the run in the game in Green Bay. So you could have done that. I think they have some of those elements on the roster, but just recently we've seen them sort of deny themselves to go in that direction when I feel like it would behoove them to find that balance, is find the run game that was there the 4 games before this last stretch of 4 where they haven't had 100 rushing yards in any of them.
Yeah, behoove. I like that, Furones. See, the little education on this show. I like that. All right, let's go out here and see what folks are talking about. The first one I'm going to address is Matthew Blue. Is there any validity to the rumors that McDaniel might be close to losing the locker room? No, I don't see that. And I did a column on this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And look, I've always said I admire this team's fighting spirit. They're not quitters. They don't give up. They stay together. They stay behind Mike McDaniel. That's what I've seen. That's what I continue to see. So that's my 2 cents on that situation. Scott Pro Furones, he asked, can you ask McDaniel why in the hell on a 4th and goal, Hill and Smith were on the sideline on a must-have play in a must-win game? I'm not sure about Jonnu. I know Tyreek was definitely not out there. I'm not mad at him for that. I know that you did a story talking about McDaniel and that play, but I'm not mad at him for the personnel. Tyreek is smallish. Jalen Waddle is smallish. Jonnu could help, but I want my bigger targets out there, or I want a River Craycraft or a Durham Smythe or a Julian Hill, guys who can block. I'm not mad at him for the personnel, Furones.
Yeah, I would like to see Jonnu Smith there because he can go over the top and make a catch down by the goal line. Tyreek Hill, yeah, I get it. He's short, but also we've seen him get open on some 1-2 yard touchdowns where just a quick move, Tua's timing, that precision, they can score on that. So and Mike McDaniel, he took the blame on that play call. He did. Without even provocation. He put it on himself. That he didn't like the play call that he made, and I think maybe part of it was, I wonder if he wanted to get Alec Ingold a touchdown back in his hometown, because that play was the first read as Tua was to Alec Ingold, and then Ingold slipped going out to the right flat, which he was covered anyway, but it goes back also to the identity of power of football running it. They didn't trust the run game to get to 1 yard in the cold for a touchdown that could have made it a 1-possession game. So, that's telling in itself.
That's very telling. I don't like that fact, but you're exactly right. That is incredibly telling. One Eye Jack says, why even bring Chubb back this year? I don't think it's worth it. I think you've got to bring him back for a couple of reasons. Number one, because he's been working his butt off, and you would like to see him get some reward, even if it's just 2 games. Number two, you need him. You're still in this thing. So I 100%, as long as you're alive, you bring him back. And because he's been working his butt off, you bring him back. What do you think, Furones?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of fans always want to just fast forward to the next thing and then prematurely just move on to the offseason and the draft and firing folks before the team is even actually out of it. So, no, an NFL franchise is not going to give up prematurely. And by the numbers, I think we'll talk about it in the next segment in more detail. But, yes, they still have a chance. So you're going to play it that way. Hey, even the Jets last year, Aaron Rodgers, they designated him for a return, even though they never actually brought him back to play. But coming back from the Achilles, let him come back and actually practice. So for Bradley Chubb, you do that, and then you keep yourself in it, let's say, with a win against the Jets, which some on this show are guaranteeing, maybe not all. We will find out at the end of the show. Make sure to stay tuned for that. But then if you go forward and you keep winning games, then maybe Bradley Chubb could become an X factor down the final stretch as you are making what could become a more realistic push toward the postseason if you get yourself into that position.
Lee Kingsnatch says, don't care who the GM is, first round QB. Our QB is made of glass, and our next QB needs to be on next year's team. Tua is one hit from instant retirement, folks. Face it. Then draft Mason Taylor. Richard Schrock says, what about Greer's inability to fix the issues in the trenches? That's been going on for more than 3 years, Perk. He must go. Let me say this, and we'll hear from you, Furones. I think the backup quarterback needs to be a veteran. If you still have aspirations of winning in the playoffs, I'm not trusting this to a rookie quarterback if Tua goes down, even if he's a first-round pick. I still don't know if you can play, even if you're a first-round pick. As far as the trenches, to me, that's a little overrated. I think the bigger problem is your superstar players don't produce in the big games. And I'm looking at Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, anecdotally, I think Zach Sealer is the guy who produces the best in those big games. It's not necessarily the trenches. I think it's your superstar players. What do you think, Furones, on quarterback and trenches?
Yeah, because, I mean, we did just see a stretch early in the season when the Dolphins needed to run the football, just to have any semblance of an offense without Tua, and they were able to do it. So I feel like there's something there that you can go back to and find some balance when you do have Tua in the lineup. I know you kind of felt justified getting away from it because Tua was on such a hot streak, and I mean, to an extent, still is, because, I mean, he threw for 345 and had, 29 out of 40. The stats have kind of already left my memory from Thursday night, coming from Thursday to Tuesday show instead of Sunday to Tuesday. But, I mean, he had a fine performance in the cold. Like, I'm not putting any blame on Tua for that game. Granted, the offense could have been a little bit better in the early going, and he missed a couple of open targets. But, I mean, I think that's just part of playing football. You know, you're not going to be perfect either. So his performance at least gave me confidence that next time, if it's at Cleveland, if it's at the Jets, and those games still mean something, it won't be because of Tua that the Dolphins lose those cold weather games. But they got to get the tackling form corrected next time they are in those elements. Physicality. I mean, trenches, we've seen it for some parts, and then backup quarterback will be the most important thing going forward in the offseason if they stick to mostly everybody on this core going into next season. With a few tweaks into starting lineups, backup quarterback will be a huge focal point.
It will. It will. Before we go to our next segment, how about this one from Matt Newton? The number one problem for the Dolphins is an identity problem. They're no longer that speed team. I don't know what they are right now, and Matt Newton might be partially correct. They're not a physical team. They're not a running team. I don't know what they are right now, but that speed thing and the how we used to all quote the next gen stats and all the analytics, and they have a great sprint relay team. All that stuff is out the window. I don't know who this team is, Furones, right now.
Yeah, well, Jalen Waddle has never even heard of the speed. You never heard it. When it was brought up just yesterday, that was my lead to yesterday.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy. I would like to see this team establish itself as something down the stretch, and I guess this dink and dunk offense. I just want to see them win. They're 3-3 since Tua has been back, and they've done some good things. But man, I would like to see them establish some kind of an identity and play to that identity. All right, Ferone.
No, well, the thing is, they still have that speed, so it's still there. It's just a matter of, I mean, maybe you still got to kind of take your shots, even though I know it's taking what the defense gives you, but still maybe work it into what your offensive game plan is. You can draw pass interferences. I think if you show a willingness also to try it against those cover two looks, too high shells, you can still find something. So maybe there's a balance between you take what the defense gives you, but then also take your shots, because sometimes if defenses can just play like, oh, we know they're not going to go for it because we're covering it, you catch them by surprise maybe one time and hit one of those deep shots that we have seen before.
I agree. If you have a second and short, go over the top. What the hell? All right. So do the Dolphins have legit playoff chances, Furones? I think their path to the playoffs, and you've heard me say this many times, remains the same. You beat the non-playoff teams on your schedule. If you do that the rest of the way, Houston right now is the only playoff team on your schedule. So if you go 4-1, you finish 9-8, I think you're probably in. If you win the rest of your games, you go 10-7, you're definitely in. I think 9-8 probably gets you in. So if you beat the non-playoff teams on your schedule, which is what you did in 2022 for the most, look, that's what most playoff teams do, right? I don't know anybody who's playing like 8 playoff teams or 9 playoff teams on their schedule, but you beat the non-playoff teams, you still have that path to the playoffs. What I worry about, Furones, is the road and the time of year, because I don't really look at the temperature. I look at road games against decent teams in December and January. We know that the Dolphins are 7-16 on the road under Mike McDaniel. They're 4-10 in December and January under Mike McDaniel. So those two things are kind of what makes me antsy about this, but they can still get to the playoffs.
Yes, absolutely. And I ran some numbers according to the New York Times' playoff predictor, playoff machine. So if they win out, which is what many guys have said, that's the goal from now on. And yes, I know they also said, like Tyreek Hill was saying, after the Buffalo loss that got them to, that was 2-6 at that point. Hey, we got to treat every game like it's the playoffs, every game like it's an elimination game. Well, yeah, I mean, you adjust that a little bit once you lose one game. Which you all kind of knew. They probably still had one more loss to give, where they could still get in. But I think now with 7 losses at 5-7, yes, you do need to win out. That's what Calais Campbell said after the game in Lambeau Field. I feel like 10-7 gets us in. Zach Sealer has echoed a similar sentiment. Many others as well. So I ran some numbers, and then according to that New York Times playoff predictor, 87% chance that the Dolphins make the playoffs by winning out, going 10-7. So it's a small 13% chance of other teams pull off some wins they're not expected to, and then some tiebreakers don't go their way. But more likely than not, 10-7 will get you in, even as we've seen this past Sunday slate didn't help the Dolphins. I wrote about that. And then even on Monday night, the Dolphins could have used a Denver Broncos loss, but that didn't happen. So right now the Dolphins are sitting 2.5 games back of Denver for the final playoff spot. And then there's other routes too, because Baltimore's loss to the Eagles, maybe the one bit of help, even though, I mean, they face a really tough Eagles team. So maybe somewhat expected. It wasn't like it was an upset. They're also 8-5, although I doubt that the Ravens would fall all the way out of the postseason, even though they are 3-3 in their last 6. Now, Houston also is 8-5, and the Indianapolis Colts are still 6-7, a half a game ahead of the Dolphins. Now, all those teams are on bye coming up this next weekend. So the Dolphins can gain ground, gain a half game on all of them with a win at home against the lowly 3-9 Jets, who I believe would be eliminated if they lose that game. So you can knock them out as well, as I feel the Dolphins will be motivated to bounce back and then also obviously keep their season alive. But then any 4-1 combination brings the Dolphins' playoff chances to 30% at most, or high 20s, depending on which matchup it is. Obviously, tiebreakers come into play. If you lose to the 49ers, then that would be the one that hurts the least because it's an NFC team. So it's not as meaningful toward tiebreakers if you have 9-8 tiebreakers and such. So there's routes, and don't discount the Houston Texans being 8-5, although they have that AFC South playoff spot. If the Colts win enough, if the Colts just keep going, they can overtake a 2-game lead that the Texans have in the AFC South. And the Dolphins, in that scenario, if they're beating the Texans in 2 weeks in Houston, they could own the tiebreaker over them for a wild card spot, one that they would not have against the Colts because they did lose to them earlier this season. So that's something to monitor. Although the Texans have that AFC South spot right now, they have a tough schedule later on with the Ravens, with the Chiefs on there. If the Dolphins also get a head-to-head win, then that's one spot that could go their way if they win that game and continue winning, while the Texans maybe lose some of those matchups to teams like the Ravens and Chiefs.
All right, we're getting good here on the chat. So we've got a few good things going on here. Dave Harbor says playoffs, false hope yet again. Raphael Courtwright, which I've written about this, says Mike McDaniel career record 25-21, 0-2 in the postseason, 25-23 1-loss record, FYI. You're exactly right, Raphael. Nick S. says, why would we want to go to the playoffs? Who would we be able to beat? What's up, Mal? Be crazy. And Nick continues to say, I hope we lose our last 5 games so we get a better draft pick. So here's the deal. Yes, you are fighting to probably go get your teeth kicked in Buffalo or Baltimore or Pittsburgh or a cold weather locale, but that's better than missing the playoffs. If you lose the last 5 and you get some middling first round draft pick, which, in 5 and 12, you're probably, I don't know, Furones, what, number 7, number 6, number 5, whatever. Make the playoffs, get in the tournament, and win in advance. That's what you always want to do. That's what you want to do in this situation. If you were, the Brian Flores days, maybe not. But in this situation, you definitely do want to get in. Comrade says, I think we need 10 wins to get in. 9 won't be enough. We'll see. I'm not really trusting Denver. They got a rookie quarterback. I know they have that outstanding defense, but I'm not really trusting them. Regardless, Furones, what's the future? What's the reward for going up to Buffalo and losing for a 3rd time this year in cold weather? Is there a reward in going to the playoffs? I think there is.
Well, and here's the thing about it is if you do what you need to do to get into the postseason, the Dolphins will be a cold weather team by then because they're gonna play at Cleveland Week 17. They're going to play at the New York Jets Week 18. So let's just say they do go in on a 5-game win streak, which would also be winning 8 of your last 9 going into the postseason. The last 2 games you played are already in those elements. The Miami Dolphins will be a cold weather team by the time the wild card round is played, and they go into either Kansas City or Buffalo or Pittsburgh, maybe Baltimore. No, probably not, but because they're in 5 now. But yeah, the Dolphins will be a cold weather team by then if they do what they do.
There we go. As we might find out in the Furones bonus, maybe, right? Nick comes back with the numbers 10. Number 7 to 10 in the draft is way better than 19 to 21 in the draft. I hear you, and you're right. But for this particular team, I'm not sure that the number 7 pick is really going to get you over the top, right? Most likely veterans are getting you over the top with this team. You were pretty veteran laden. I don't know, a rookie. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, maybe a slot receiver, maybe a guard. Who cares? Edge rusher. You just got your rookie edge rusher. Furones, where would the number 1 pick make the most immediate impact for this team, do you think, from where we stand now?
Well, I think they've proven interior offensive line isn't where they'll go because they had to go for Graham Barton at a Duke, who was my projection in the mock draft. So I admit when I'm wrong as well, although last I saw, I don't know how he's continued, but I know early in this, Graham Barton was having with Tampa Bay, but I haven't kept track to see if that has continued. But if he has, then that would have been a fine. Like I always liked him in the spot. So yeah, Chris Greer goes best player available. So you may be looking in the secondary because you may depart from both of your starters this year. Jordan Poyer on a veteran contract and has struggled, and then Javon Holland has also, honestly, he's struggled too. He's supposed to be in his prime of his career. I know he's done some injuries, but and he did make the big play. Got to give him credit where credit due for the Dolphins' first win this season, punching the ball out on Travis Etienne at the goal line, which flipped that game around. So do give him credit there. But after that, it's kind of just been a nondescript year for Javon Holland. So as he goes into a contract year, so I honestly don't see it. He's expecting big money. I think someone else will probably offer it to him just on the potential that he has had over time and not necessarily on what he has accomplished of late.
Yep. Let's see. What did I see on here that I wanted to address? Scott Pro talking about my draft thing says, no, this team is too old. We need young sheep players, not old vets that can't stay healthy. Trinity Soundworks, what's up? Glad to see you in here. Nick S says we need to build through the draft. A top 10 pick would at least get us a stud O-line. And Mark chimes in with, we can beat Buffalo. It took a bad penalty and a 61-yard field goal to beat us last time. Furones, can they beat Buffalo, do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's exactly to who was it? I didn't pull up the chat.
Mark said that.
Mark, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
great point, Mark. I mean, yeah, they went down to the wire. It was a 61-yard field goal or whatever it was to win in the final moments on a bang-bang, personal foul, unnecessary roughness, Jordan Poyer penalty over there that advanced Buffalo on a key third down. I saw plenty in that game. That was why I came on this show right after the Tuesday following and said the Dolphins were on the verge of a turnaround, and they won 3 straight after that. And I did expect this loss to the Green Bay Packers, so I'm not veering off of that. I mean, I did predict the Dolphins would lose in Green Bay. I thought it'd be a closer game, but I also saw Tua perform just fine in the cold. He wasn't necessarily the reason that they lost in that game. I mean, he could have been slightly sharper, but the tackling was the number one concern. So if they can go over the film, I think they've identified the things that they did wrong fundamentally with their form, with their technique in tackling in the cold. If they can correct that and come in with the right mindset, that they won't be affected by those elements next time they go in and play a tougher brand of football defensively and maybe also commit to the run, I think they could go back into those elements and perform better. So I think it's good that they got that one out of the way earlier, end of November, when you saw 20-degree temperatures in Green Bay, and then now you kind of understand what it's going to take to win in those elements for the final 2 road games of the season, and then if you do get into the playoffs, whichever cold weather environment you go into then.
All right. Let's see. And there was one other thing that I saw on here that I wanted to address before we moved on to our Furones bonus. Let's see here. No, we won't. All right. We will go to, I know, we will migrate.
Pretty anticlimactic transition.
I know it. I lost it, and then I just decided we'll catch that in the next segment. But here, we are going to go to one of the top 4 segments on this 4-segment show. It's growing in popularity every week. It is the Furones bonus.
Oh, the Furones bonus.
All right, I love it, baby. I love it.
I was going to say, do you not love it this time?
Yes, I do love it. I always love it. All right. So, I was a little late. I know my timing was a little late. I'm a little off here right now.
We're working on a delay here.
Yeah, I know. I'm putting it in. It's a built-in perk delay. So, Furones, the narratives around this team are numerous. There's narratives that they can't win in cold weather. Narratives they can't beat good teams. They collapse into.
I've never heard.
Very nice, Damon Waddle. Narratives that they're a soft team. They collapse in December and January. So, Furones, 5 games remaining on the schedule. What narrative or narratives will the Dolphins dispel in the remainder of the season?
Okay, I think first I'll go with the collapse in December, January this time around, because I feel like the season flipped. This season flipped. Instead of starting off hot like we have seen in the first 2 years of McDaniel Tua, where they were 8-3 2022, 9-3 2023, and then boom, it all comes crashing down. This year it was the opposite. The 4-game absence of Tua due to concussion put them in a tough spot early. Now they're making a late season push to come from behind for a playoff spot instead of having that cushion that they're used to. So now I think the one would be collapse in December, January. We're going to see, we already saw in November, the 3 straight wins at Green Bay was always going to be tough. I never had them winning that game, even if I thought they were accomplishing everything this year. I always had them losing that game at Green Bay in potential cold weather, which did, in fact, develop into cold weather there. So that's what I think it'll be, is that they'll come out strong. They win. We'll see if I predict them to win against the Jets. We'll save that for the final segment. But they start to win games, and maybe you would have seen that collapse start in the other ones that you're giving me can't beat good teams. We're not really going to see that yet because we won't see them play good teams. Even the one playoff team right now would be the Houston Texans. And as I said last segment, it's realistic that they could just fall out entirely based on their schedule. They're not playing that great of late. They just barely beat Jacksonville. Now, one of their key defenders, Aziz Al-Shire, FAU grad, middle linebacker, he's going to be suspended as it stands now. It'll be 3 games, the first one of which will be this matchup against the Dolphins after the Dolphins play the Jets and after the Houston Texans bye week. So that would be the first one if it withstands the appeal that he's currently going through. So, and then they have the Chiefs and the Ravens after that too. So we don't know if that team will still be considered a good team. It's still a road game and also in a dome or a retractable roof. What do they have in Houston? I forget. But it won't be a cold weather game, right? Is it retractable?
I think it's a dome. I think that the NRG Stadium, I think, is a dome.
Or is a dome entirely? Okay.
I think.
So,
yeah.
Right. But either way, you're not going to see face elements in Houston. So you can't really dispel that narrative. Well, as far as the cold weather, we won't see it until Cleveland, December 29th. But then it won't be the good teams narrative. It won't be good teams in cold weather because now you got to face bad teams in cold weather. In a pair of 3-win teams in the Browns and the Jets. So that one, not yet. They won't be able to dispel that until if they do get to the playoffs. So if they're a soft team, that one will also be either proven or dispelled once we get to that stretch. So that's what I'm going with, is that they will dispel, if I had to choose one, the December-January collapse. It won't happen this year. They're going to advance toward playoff goal. Whether it leads to the playoffs or not will be determined, but it won't be because of a December or January collapse this year. Although I know a lot of fans would prefer to just see another December or January collapse so they get a better draft pick.
We're getting a few of those in the chat right now. Let me throw something out to the fans. And, you guys know that I don't like this cold weather narrative. I think it's a bunch of crap. And Zoe Vegas 75 says, let's see it. He said it should, then it would mean that the cold isn't the real factor. It's just that the teams we play in the cold are just better. Talking about that narrative. Here's what I think, that they lose to good teams and it's on the road and it happens to be in the cold. And so like last year, it was Buffalo and Kansas City. This year, it's Green Bay. I got news for you. You weren't beating those teams in any location, in any month, in any temperature. Those teams beat you. Like, you don't beat those kinds of teams, especially on the road. And so I don't think that there's been a bad team that they've lost to in cold weather. Now, they haven't played a bad. Washington last year was what, like 53 or 55 or whatever. The black, is that right?
That it was nice out,
It was nice. Okay.
Yeah. Cold for Miami standards, like in Miami, people would say it's freezing, but over there,
right. The Black Friday game last year, it was, probably what, 55 or 58, whatever. It was beautiful. And so you just haven't had I can't think of a bad team that they played in freezing temperatures. Can you? It's since McDaniel's been here.
Right. So that's why we're really going to find out. We're going to find out those final 2 games because the Browns are bad and the Jets are
right.
So,
and here's
it is.
Exactly. And you know what, Furones, and you were in the media room a couple of weeks ago when Kim Bokemper was sitting in there, and I went over to Bo and I said, Bo, when did this cold weather narrative start with the Dolphins? Because I don't remember it in the Shula days, in the 70s. I don't remember it in the Marino days. I don't remember it with the Killer Bees. This is my 16th year on the beat. We didn't talk about this as much in the Tannehill days. We talked about Buffalo being more physical than the Dolphins. We didn't talk about the temperature. And so this whole temperature thing, I mean, it doesn't come up with Tampa Bay, with Jacksonville, New Orleans, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta. Like it only comes up with the Dolphins and when you're in a bad stretch, right? Do I have that right or do I have that wrong?
Well, like I do remember, like in my childhood and early adolescence, the early 2000s teams who were kind of like the last ones that were consistently competitive in terms of vying for playoff spots year in and year out. And yeah, you would have those late game or late season scenarios where they went into the cold and collapsed. I mean, that was the thing in the 90s too, like 93 season. Well, what was the record going into December? Did it have an 0-5 December? Or was it 0-4? One or the other. Yeah, that year that led to a collapse. So I mean, I think it has been around for some time, especially Dolphins teams that were considered good, got off to good starts. Like I remember in 02, in 03, got off to hot starts, and then sort of like those two teams, by the way, missed the playoffs at 9-7, 10-6. And I think part of it was, I recall like 02 team losing at New England in a year where actually the Patriots, in a run of 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, did not make the playoffs. That was the last time the Jets won the AFC East, was the 02 regular season, and that they also lost at Minnesota, though that was a dome. But 03 also, I recall a low-scoring game at New England when Teddy Bruschi ran a pick six in and was like sliding in the snow as he went into the end zone. So teams that had prospects, I remember them losing the cold, but it wouldn't be a factor for teams you're talking about, like Kim Camper days and obviously 72 Dolphins. They went undefeated, so they won all their regardless.
Yeah, my point is it comes down to talent, right? I mean, you remember when the Dolphins had spanked Buffalo for like 20 straight years in the O.J. Simpson days, and then you turn around to the Jim Kelly days, and the Dolphins can't beat Buffalo. Temperature had nothing to do with it. It had to do with talent. I don't remember temperature being a factor for UM. I don't know that temperature holds back the SEC teams, right? I mean, like, this is just, I don't know. This is just all made up.
When you go to that, though, I do remember it usually coming up for these UM teams when they would go, let's say, like late in the year, if they had at Pitt on Black Friday. Remember, like the 2017 team had to go there. They would lose that game, or like if you.
But wait a minute, But did they lose because of the cold? Like, the cold didn't affect the good UM teams. It's affected the mediocre and bad UM teams.
Better. Those teams were better than their opponent. But then, yes, and those are all like mostly South Florida kids,
right,
who go into the cold, and maybe that's the first time they've ever even been in temperature of that magnitude, so low. So for them it could happen. And then I think for the SEC teams, it doesn't come up as much because it's a geographical conference over time. So they're staying within the southeast region of the United States as they play these games. And then once they have the bowl games later, it's Orange Bowl in Miami. It's New Orleans. You're in the Cotton Bowl. You're in the Rose Bowl. You're in the Fiesta Bowl. You're in warm weather bowl environments. The Peach Bowl, of course, in Atlanta. So so I think that's also why you wouldn't see it with college teams, with great college teams.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Zovegas 75 chimes back in with, apparently teams were complaining about the heat and the unfair advantage for the fans in Miami. This is a weather advantage down here. I would say the only game that I think they won because of the weather in the McDaniel era was the Buffalo game, right? The 21-19 where the Bills are falling out. And truthfully, the Dolphins probably win that game without that heat/humidity advantage. They were the better team that day, but it definitely helped. It definitely helped put them over the top. But I'm not going to take anything away from the Dolphins from that victory and say, wow, they only won because of the heat. They'd have lost to Buffalo otherwise. I think that that's the other thing. I think the narrative does a disservice toward the teams that win, also saying that, well, the only reason you beat the Dolphins is because it was cold. In truth, you were usually the better team. That's what I think.
I recall covering that game, and players on both sides were falling out, having to tap out of the game. So, and it probably more so was Josh Allen skipped a pass to the end zone when he had an open for a go-ahead touchdown, and then also ran out of time, causing Ken Dorsey to throw equipment all over his suite. in a Hard Rock Stadium box upstairs. There were other factors there, but I mean, the Heat probably helped.
Yes, it did.
Also, a lot of Buffalo injuries going into that one. I think most of their secondary was out for that game, which was why I actually switched my prediction. Before that game, I did have the Dolphins win. I correctly called it.
There you go. Look at you, baby. Look at you. Little pat on the back for you. Shake Money, what's up? EJ Barrow, John Yang. Let's see. Shake. Very good point here. All right, so let's migrate over to our last segment. But before we do that, we're gonna squeeze in the Shake Money comment here. Shake Money said, "What's good, everyone? Did we cut Skylar Thompson yet?" Furones, we did not address the Skylar Thompson Snoop Huntley thing. Gosh, you guys know I'm a Skylar Thompson fan. That's one of my boys. It appears the Skylar Thompson era is over in this town. For him to be jumped by Snoop Huntley, and you guys remember I asked Mike McDaniel, do you trust Skylar? And he said, yes. What else is Mike McDaniel going to say? But I had to ask the question. That's probably it for Skylar Thompson after this season. Would you say, Furones?
Yeah, I think it was pretty telling. And, I mean, the moment that sealed it, well, among others, but he's just in to run out the clock, and then you give up a defensive score on a botched handoff to Jalen Wright that was high in his chest shoulder instead of right in the breadbasket. So, yeah, I mean, that moment, and the offense come out of the huddle, consistently been late with getting all the play calls, receiving them, communicating them to the rest of the offense, and then the operation at the line of scrimmage was not up to standard. Mike McDaniel's complex offense, and now 3 years into it. So I think you saw all those things, and then he had the opportunity to now come back into the fold after his falling out and that injury that he suffered in Seattle, which was a result also of holding on to the ball too long and reads. So that was another thing in an offense where it's so vital to be on time, like Tua is when he's in there. So, yeah, I mean, I totally get it. Tyler Snoop Huntley jumps him as backup quarterback, and then that's a roster spot that's available for whether it's Bradley Chubb whenever he's available, or maybe you keep that emergency third quarterback, Skylar Thompson. It was Thompson as the backup just Thursday night in Green Bay, but that was when Huntley was just activated hours earlier. So now with a full week as a backup, Mike McDaniel did tell us that Huntley will be the backup.
Yeah. That's I hate that for Skylar, but that's reality, and that's the way it goes. And as we were saying in the media room yesterday, when me, you, and Barry Jackson were talking, and Barry brought up the good point that kind of the indictment for Skylar was Mike McDaniel saying he didn't like the whole operation, the way they broke the huddle, it wasn't just the handoff, it was the whole operation. And yeah, I think that's the most telling statement of all. By the way, EJ Barrow, we're on the same vibe as far as humor. EJ says the solution to the temp factor is to use all temperature detergent on their unis. There, I love that. It's corny, but I love it. We're right there. We're right there. All right. I know that's sad. That's really sad. I don't know if that speaks worse for me or EJ. Anyway, let's go to our final segment. It is prediction time, baby. Dolphins, Jets, 1:00, Hard Rock Stadium Sunday. Furones, who you got?
All right. Of course, I have the Dolphins winning this one. I have felt the Dolphins are turning the season around. I'm not going to change off of that based off watching them lose in Green Bay, a game I felt they would lose anyway. They lost going in there hot. I felt, regardless of circumstances, that game was not one that was for them. So they come back home, and they're facing a bad Jets team. These are the games that the Dolphins win. So especially with their backs against the wall, they want to go 5-0 for the rest of the way to get into the playoffs. They start 1-0 with this win. I got them winning 30-20 against the Jets, and especially if I know Sauce Gardner is dealing with a hamstring issue. He exited the Jets last game on Sunday, so especially if he's unavailable, then I really see that factoring into the Dolphins just getting their offense going, and maybe it is a little bit of a resemblance of what we have seen in the past against what would otherwise be a very tough Jets pass defense. But if Sauce Gardner isn't in there, that changes everything.
It does. By the way, the questions that I'm going to try to answer online later on today, Mark, Richard Schrock, Raphael Courtwright, Malby Crazy, Nick, Peter McDowell, and John Yang. So they're going to have to be brief answers because you know me, I always go overboard and I always write too much, just like I always talk too much here on this show. Anyway, JD the Great One says 23-20 Dolphins, Mark 28-17 Miami, Mark Heavy 31-17. Phil Montgomery, look at this. I predict these two terrible teams will look terrible. How's that? I'm going 31-20 Dolphins. And, the one complication, Furones, that I could see for the Dolphins, the one realistic complication is their own cornerback issues, right? And so, we'll see how Kendall Fuller is, and we don't expect Cam Smith to be out there. Storm Duck might have an elevated role. We'll see if Tater Kohu can stay healthy. But look, Garrett Wilson can do some damage over there, right? So at wide receiver. So that's a potential trouble spot. But other than that, I think the Dolphins should be okay. They're fairly healthy. They're at home. We've seen this offense score 27 and 30 points with Tua running the show. And so I really do think that, I'm saying 31-20. I really do think that the Dolphins ought to have a good game here, get things rolling again, and then have some momentum as they go into Houston. One-Eye Jack says 24-17 Dolphins. Wow, Dave Harbor, 28-17 Jets. Really, Dave? Wow. So, by the way, Derek says, as an athlete, it does feel a little different running around and tackling in the cold, but once you start running, you warm up and you barely notice the climate when you are focused. Don't buy the cold. So that's that. Let's see here. Commissary.
I would buy it, but just how come in that game is when you see the tackling form go entirely awry? How come it would be that? Why would it be that game specifically? Yeah, if I could do the Brian Windhorst, why would they do that?
What I would say? I maybe a little fear factor. You're playing a good team, and I don't know. I mean, they didn't.
When it's cold, those hits, that contact stings more. It hurts a little more. That's my theory. Is that's why you tackle in a way where you hope to soften that blow as much as possible instead of sticking to your technique. So I think it does play a factor. But if you can just mentally take it out of your mind, say, hey, it's going to hurt for both guys anyway. We gotta get our job done and bring this guy down. Then that's when I think they can get over that mental hurdle.
Yeah, you know what? One of us journalists ought to do some kind of a informal study on how many years these players on the Dolphins have in cold weather. Because Liam Eichenberg grew up in Cleveland and he played at Notre Dame. Chop Robinson played at Penn State, but he grew up in Maryland. And one of us journalists ought to do that. We should. It's kind of our job. Anyway.
We're talking to Chop Robinson yesterday, and then he was mentioning how, he played at Penn State, so obviously they face the elements late season games there. But he said he was used to the cold, but when he first got off the plane after spending so many months in Miami, it kind of hits you like, whoa, I think your body gets accustomed to being in warm weather. I mean, I attended a with a lot of students that would come from up north. A lot of students that came from New Jersey, Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, etc. And I always found it interesting. Sometimes they dealt with when it got Miami cold, like it got to maybe there was a 40-degree cold front, and they were actually freezing. And I said I thought this is what you were used to, and they would tell me no. I mean, it changes you once you go through several months in the heat and humidity of Miami.
Yep, that is fact. People have told me that too, and I do believe that is 100% fact. So we'll see what happens with Cleveland and the New York Jets, those road games. More importantly, we're going to see what happens this Sunday. Dolphins hosting the Jets in a game that, let's face it, they can't lose. They just can't lose if they want realistic playoff hopes to survive. So that is David Furones. I'm Chris Perkins. What do you got to say, Furones? What do you got?
Oh, I was just going to say, if they lose, then for all you fans that want the offseason content, that's what we win, because they are surely out of it if they lose. We will hype up, ramp up all the off coverage. We're going to start pulling out mock drafts and looking into what the Dolphins should address in the offseason, because the season would definitely be over if they lose this game at home to the Jets.
Yeah, and it's too early for me to. Yeah, it's too early for me to start looking ahead, baby. I would rather look at them trying to go 1-0 in Houston. So let's
I'm going to stay alive, but all these fans that want want to look ahead, we'll start that coverage if they lose to the Jets.
We would. All right, Furones, we're getting out of here. We will see you folks next Tuesday at noon on sunsentinel.com.